Welcome back, everybody, to Guns and Mental Health. Thanks for streaming our content if you're streaming it. Thanks for downloading it if you're downloading it. But just thanks for checking in and listening, and please share this around if you find it interesting, because that's how people get better in this world. We share information. We don't hoard it. That's exactly why we do this, because this information doesn't do any good locked up in our heads. So we want to share it around and help make Earth better, as Mike likes to say. We are joined today by Janine De Mesa. How are you, Janine?
Hi, I'm doing great, Jake. How are you?
I'm awesome. You're also in the Pacific time zone, like DB and I and Kevin and Mike. Eddie's the only one who's a weirdo. He's over in North Carolina. And Brandon is on assignment, as we like to say. He's actually come down with the same 4-week-long cold that we've all been battling, trading it around apparently. So it's just us chickens. But welcome to the show. You are going to teach us on something, but I want to leave that as a surprise for you to share with the audience. So why don't you introduce yourself to us? Tell us how you got here, what you're doing, and what hood you rep, and all that stuff.
Okay. Well, my name is Janine De Mesa, 6 years Air Force vet. I worked in medical, surgical, OBGYN, and in-vitro fertilization. I was a medic. I actually joined as open general, so they gave me my job at boot camp. That was kind of just like, I want to get out of LA, and I'm just ready to ship out. So I joined to travel the world, but I got stuck pretty much in San Antonio, Texas. That's where basic training is for Air Force, and I got stationed at Joint Base San Antonio, which is the largest DoD hospital in the United States. With that, meaning people get stuck there a lot. So I didn't get to PCS anywhere. I got out in 2019 to finish my bachelor's in marketing, and then I moved to San Francisco to start my MBA. And around that time, I was kind of going through a transitional phase of my life, and I wanted to, I have been taking SSRIs for about 5, 6 years. It started when I was in the military, and then it just carried on to civilian life. And I've been trying to get off it, but every time I would get off medication, I would just nosedive back into depression. And it was a lot, trying to get off and then failing. And I just feel like I actually need Prozac on every day of my life to just be normal. And around that time, I finally decided I'm going to talk to my psychiatrist. I want to get off SSRIs because I want to experience that full range of emotion. Because when I was on Prozac, I feel like when I'm happy, I couldn't be completely happy. And when I'm sad, I couldn't completely experience that sadness. And it's just very in the middle. And I finally convinced my psychiatrist to get me off medication. So we created a plan, and it was to do a 10 milligram increment decrease every single month. And I did not tell them about this big part of it, but every time I would experience a withdrawal symptom, I would microdose. So I would take a little bit of just a stem. I didn't even measure it, but it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to take a stem or I'm going to take a cap. And it would just alleviate the withdrawal symptom. And at this point, I have already experimented with psilocybin. I would sometimes do them with a friend or, just do them by myself, kind of to introspect and view things in a different lens. And month after month, I would meet with my psychiatrist, and he would decrease my Prozac milligrams to 10 milligram increments. And 4 or 5 months later, I was completely off of it. And at that point, I just couldn't believe that I'm off medications because it's been 6 years. And I'm like, okay, finally, I'm not on anything. And around this time, I was already getting involved with Heroic Hearts Project, which is a nonprofit organization sending veterans or sending veterans to Peru or Mexico to get access to psychedelic treatments. And I was really excited because one of the prerequisites to go is to not be on SSRIs, because that could interact with substances like ayahuasca or peyote or any of that stuff. So I finally told them that, hey, I'm off medications. I could do a retreat this year. And I had to do the dieta, which is a specific diet that we have to do 4 to 6 weeks ago.
Did we lose her? Or am I the only one?
Seems like we're having a little technical difficulties, but I think she's back.
Okay, there we go.
Sorry. Yeah, it says my connection was stable on here. So where did I stop? Where did you lose me?
You were talking about a specific diet, and you were on that diet.
Okay, so we had to go on a specific diet for ayahuasca, or in preparation for ayahuasca, and it's called La Dieta. We couldn't have salt, no sugar, no processed food, no alcohol, and no caffeine, which is the worst part because I've been drinking coffee since I was 15. And yeah, so they told us that before we even go to the ayahuasca ceremony that we would start feeling the effects of it. And I believe it was because of La Dieta. And it was interesting because my group and I all kind of had similar experiences. And it was a very opening, and it made us very sensitive. And I'm sure it's because, you know, we're being cleansed. Like literally we're eating good food that we cook. We're not eating out, we're not eating processed food, and it just made us feel good. So I did my ayahuasca ceremony, and I can get into that later, but I got back and I feel like I'm a completely new person. And it's not a one-time thing that's going to fix all of your anxiety and depression, but it was more like the experience that I had there gave me a whole different perspective in life. And I felt a sense of rebirth. So
let me jump in, Janine, because there's so much that you're throwing out here, and I definitely want to get into the research end of things. But while we're on personal testimonies, I think it's really important for the non-participant listeners, people who haven't undergone this type of thing, to understand exactly what you mean when you say you felt this transformation, but it wasn't a fix, right? Like, as I bang my microphone, that makes for good radio. You felt this transformation, but it wasn't a fix. I want to hover there for a second and help the listening audience understand this, because I've had enough conversations with people who've undergone similar things to think that I know what they're talking about. But I would like to hear you explain it in your words.
Okay. So I mean that in a sense of you go through this, you know, psychedelic experience, and you experience some things, you see things like you had visions, and it won't necessarily fix you right there. I believe that the actual fixing or healing would be in the integration process. Now, how are you going to integrate what you learned from this experience into your daily life? So for me, on my first ceremony, I thought I was going to tackle problems that I have now as an adult, but the medicine has a completely different plan where it sent me back to my childhood trauma. It was like, it's not, you're not in control. It's not you who's deciding what you're going to fix. We're going to fix you to your core. So that was my experience with it. And I'm not sure if other people has had, you know, different experience with ayahuasca, but yes, you do go in with an intention. And for me, it was I wanted to be reborn since I was going through I got divorced and I was going through that and I wanted to find myself. And the integration happens when you get back from that retreat. And so with Heroic Hearts Project, we're actually paired up with a coach. We meet with them 3 times before going, and then we go to the ceremony, and then we meet with them 3 times after we go. And they actually guide us into how we could integrate what we experience during the ayahuasca ceremony into our day-to-day. It's that.
So this person follows you around, not follows you around, but follows you back home, and you're still in touch with them. Is that the idea?
Yes.
And
So
they help guide you through the reintegration. When you say reintegration, it's like, if I could, I'm going to try to make an analogy, see if it makes sense. When I teach conscious and unconscious function, when I teach Jungian analytic psychology, I describe the human psyche, soul, mind. I mean, we could split hairs about what the difference is, but the point is, this thing that's intangible within us that comprises us can get shattered into different fragments, and you want to take those fragments and pull them all back together so that you're not broken as a human and you're not carving out pieces of who you could be. Is that similar to the reintegration that you're talking about? You'd carved out pieces of you over the years and like either pretended they didn't exist or had ignored them or willfully rejected them. Is that kind of the same idea?
yes, so it is the same idea because when you go through this kind of experiences, you face your shadow, and sometimes that's something that you don't want to see. So
Yeah, it's terrifying to face one's shadow.
yep. So what our coach does is they help us make sense of what we have experienced and how we could integrate that. Because
These coaches have psychiatric training or counseling training to like are they anchored in some sort of theory or modality like we would normally think of, and you've talked to them and laid the groundwork and they know about you so that they can give you that type of feedback? Okay.
we meet with them a few times before we go in. We go into the ceremony, and I believe they are certified with like a coaching certification for.
I'm sure,
I'm
yeah.
not sure which one it is, but yeah, I'm trying to be one of those coaches. So while I'm doing this PhD program, if I can keep up with my readings, but I'm like 120 pages behind right now. But if I could get into that, then I would love to do it because it's something that I could do voluntarily, and it'll probably help me out with my study as well because that's free research.
Absolutely. Do you guys have anything else said? Ghost in the comments on I'm guessing YouTube says I've had some of my boys talk about psychedelics helping them. He's sharing this stream, and I can testify to that too. I've had a whole bunch of people share not just psychedelics, but all the other naughty drugs that the DEA has scheduled up, including cannabis, THC, MDMA. Ketamine, like the overwhelming evidence now that this stuff is starting to emerge from the shadows is that it absolutely helps when done properly in the proper context, in the proper environment. Not going out to the club and partying, not going on a camping trip and tripping your balls off, like with, by staring at the lake or whatever, but like with true guided intentionality that you're going to heal something that's been busted within you. It is absolutely staggering how effective this stuff is in helping people move through their past traumas and their depressions and all sorts of things.
Yeah, let me jump in there, Jake, because it is really interesting. I've never really had to answer to anybody my whole life, so I can kind of speak freely on the things that have affected me. You say like not at the club partying. MDMA literally changed my life at the club partying. Right, like, and that's not so. It's always a hard to explain to somebody because there's a stigma on doing drugs, right? But me getting out of college, going through major depression, not liking the human being I was, didn't even drink alcohol. Like while I went to Arizona State, I'm the only idiot that didn't drink alcohol and have a good time at Arizona State. Taking MDMA for the first time, kind of just on a, this is, I'm going to try this. I remember like sitting there in the club in New York City, like just hanging out with my friends, having one of the best nights of my life. And I was like, why don't they give this to people that are going through a divorce or like going through marriage therapy, right? Like, so you can actually, I don't know where the balance is between when it just becomes a party or when it's helping you in a positive way. Now, I don't recommend anybody like if you're always safer not doing drugs. Like if someone says like I would never try that, I'm always like, yeah, that's the safe route. Like you're good, right? But at that same time, I think you can have that journey on a camping trip that could change your life. I think you can have that experience in a club. Now, I don't want to sit there and advocate for that's how you try it. I would always recommend you try these things if you're going to do it, to see where it opens up your mind amongst your friends that could help you through that journey and guide you there in a safe spot where, I think about like me trying ecstasy for the first time in a club in New York City. That was not a smart idea, right? Because anything could have happened. But I will say this, I was amongst people I trusted. And at that time I felt I needed it. But it is always hard to kind of tell these stories to people, especially ones in the gun community, right? Because I think there's a lot of people that use cannabis in the drug in the gun industry, but they don't want to really talk about it publicly because everyone is in fear of losing like their firearms license or their CCW, right? You have that dilemma, but it's one of those things where it's like you look at all these drugs out there. And you realize like anxiety, right? That's why everyone smokes weed, because it helps calm them down and it helps cure that. The psychedelic journey you take on mushrooms, ayahuasca, DMT, right? I've seen DMT change people's lives, watched it in real time. For those of you that know me, some of you know that every year I do security for one of the biggest gurus in psychedelics. I laugh when I say security because kind of watching over these people is just more like herding cats. Like, like none of them ever turn violent or anything like that. But it's a funny crowd. It's the opposite crowd of like the 2A crowd. But I've seen the positive changes that people have had, because many times on these retreats, people are going down there to heal, and it's always positive, and you always see. I've watched it with my eyes, like standing there, and I'm like, wow, like I'm watching this person break down and cry because they had the death of their ego or those type of situations. But I just wanted to kind of jump in there and add that to it, because I know me and you have talked about this a lot, right? But it can change your life in so many different ways, and it doesn't have to always. Sometimes it could be on accident, like for me, I had no idea what was going to happen to me that night. I had no idea the positive effect it had on me. And not only did I make it through life without abusing that, but it's something that stuck with me. I remember just changing as a human being that night and riding that high for 2 weeks, being like, I had the most amazing experience. I had this feeling, and I think it changed me as a human being. I think it made me more accepting of people. I certainly would not want to go back to the person I was before that night. Like that person, I wouldn't even get along with that person. So anyways, that's my.
Yeah, thanks for clearing that up. I think I just wanted to make sure that we weren't giving permission for people to just go out and do club drugs without any sort of intentionality. You had intentionality. You were in a safe spot with your friends. Yes, things can always go sideways in an uncontrolled environment. But I want to make sure we weren't just playing fast and loose with the rules and signing off on party drugs on Guns and Mental Health podcast.
It's difficult to talk about this subject.
Eddie,
sometimes people look at you like, yeah, you're crazy, man. Like, no.
No, I just think it's kind of cool how like the industry in a sense is evolving to this point where we're becoming more accepted, especially with like trauma and PTSD. Near my house is the Pearl Psychedelic Institute run by Dr. Raymond Turpin, and he is one of the leading researchers when it comes to like MDMA assisted therapy. And I know when I was going through my own PTSD, various stuff was out there, and I've kind of been open when I went through some of his trainings, and I really wish I would have known about that. It probably would have knocked off years of hardship off of that journey to get past things. I mean, yeah, there's like cannabis and alcohol and stuff. Like, I'm not trying to say turn to either one of those things. I'm saying, but we all self-medicate on other stuff, and when we know these things actually work.
That's a great point about the self-medication. I think that we often don't think of it in terms of self-medication when we do substances. Of course, we can think alcohol, cigarettes, nicotine, Zyn pouches, whatever. But self-medication can also take the form of, religious practice, meditation, exercise. And I think that over time, one of these days we'll do a conversation on Jungian analytic psychology, because I think that's really fun. But there's a word that Jung has called introject. Introject is not interject, which is jumping into somebody's conversation when uninvited, but introject is an unquestioned belief or assumption that you've just carried with you because. And I think we've got a lot of introjects culturally that say drugs bad, exercise good, hobbies good, drinking bad. Like we've got these categories of that have value judgments on them. And the simple fact is, when I'm teaching my students, my interns, how to do counseling and how to approach somebody who comes in with some ailment of some sort, I say, try not to judge the way that they're dealing with whatever they're dealing with. If their distresses, it's just their chosen coping skill. Now, some coping skills are more desirable than others. Some are more effective than others. Some will land you in jail. Some will land you in the hospital. But the point is, people cope in whatever way they cope with. And I don't want to judge, especially based on historical misjudgments, based on, say, our government telling us that certain things were bad because they didn't want these experiences across the populace because it threatens the structure of power. If you have cool ideas and start asking good questions, the people who are in charge may not be able to stand up under that examination. And what mind-altering drugs do is they do expand your consciousness. They do give you experiences beyond what your stated life and age would otherwise provide. So the theory is that's why they've gotten, scheduled up and regulated out. Now, of course, we've got great testimony. Ghost Tactical saying that, people are healing all over the place. And I said, and my immediate response is like, yeah, how long until Big Pharma either rejects this stuff because they can't make money off of it, or figures out a creative way to commoditize it, and then it won't be as effective, right? So there's sinister forces, I think, that are constantly trying to keep people sick. And, I'm sure we'll get into Janine's research to figure out, why this stuff works as opposed to just that it works.
One thing I want to throw in real quick before we go farther. When we're talking about we've all said MDMA or other drugs we're talking about. There's a difference between these all naturally occurring like mushrooms and shroom and peyote. There's these differences in this natural stuff than say like cocaine or methamphetamines or other things. We're not just saying, hey, go do all these drugs and open your mind. These are very specific things that these people are looking into.
Yeah, and we don't want to just, again, play fast and loose with the idea that things that have been traditionally told us that are dangerous are suddenly now not dangerous. I'm not going to start drinking bleach or rubbing lead all over my face just because somebody said, "Well, we're questioning this other
lead
stuff."
on your face. What's wrong with lead? I eat it all the time.
It's dirty. Yeah. Sorry, fan 93. This is a very interesting perspective on psychedelics. My dad was a cop, so I never did any, quote, club drugs or anything like that. He would have locked me up for it. Yeah, me too. I was raised by a cop and a teacher, and it was very, very rigidly anti all of it, right? So it took me a while to turn my mind around this years ago when I first started hearing about it, because, again, my unconscious reflexive response to that introjected belief was, no, must be bad, because I heard it from voices of authority when I was younger.
Well, and just real quick, I mean, we're also saying don't jump on this bandwagon and don't stop the train of research as well. So I think it's not something that I have really much experience with at all. I've followed the research a bit, and it's certainly interesting because it's new on the one hand, but that's not enough to really be powerful. But it clearly has people who have said that they have dealt with significant issues, and that this has been the one thing that has moved the needle forward. Now, it's not part of my practice. It's not something that I'm advocating, but what I am saying for myself as a practitioner and as a private person is that it's certainly interesting, and I'm watching it maybe on the kind of pump the brakes from my side of things, but not pump the brakes from any other aspect. Jake's point, I think, is really important. Is we all know that that pharma is going to grab this in some way. That becomes the real big question: is how, in what way does this get bit? I'm super keen to hear, Janine, like thoughts on kind of where you're going with this, and like on your own academic / personal endeavor.
So what I'm trying to do is to help people that are going through, like psychedelic experiences, make sense of what they've experienced. Because right now I am studying works of C.G. Jung and Stanislav Grof. And
What is that? You should explain that.
So with in terms of C.G. Jung, his you just talked about him earlier, right? Psychologist, or psychiatrist with a strong interest in spirituality and the role of it plays in the human psyche. He believed that spirituality was an essential aspect of human experiences and was linked to the unconscious mind. So right now, too, we are connecting that to Stanislav Grof's study in basic perinatal matrices, which is a theoretical model of the states of awareness before and during birth. This is something that a lot of people experience during psychedelic experiences. And I too experienced it, and I didn't even know that there was a term for it. I didn't know that it was a concept. Not until I was learning it this semester. And I was just sitting in class like, oh, that's what it's called. So BPMs basically divided in 4 stages. And it's there's a connection between death and birth in the unconscious psyche. And this is because birth itself can be potentially life-threatening for both mom and baby, or at least for the baby, like the infant being delivered. And according to Stan Grof's research, there is a death that occurs each time the baby is born, because then the fetus dies and reborn as a living, breathing human form. So there's different life forms that's significant. And there's that transition, kind of like a rites of passage, which is interesting because a lot of shamanic traditions have that as well. They practice it, and connecting that to the perinatal matrices, they form the core of the coex systems, which is another concept coined by Stanislav Grof. It's a system of condensed, sorry, I'm learning this as I'm talking about it, so it's still processing. So it's a system of condensed experiences that can perceive how we react to the world. And so pretty much what we see during our psychedelic experiences, it is our unconscious psyche at work, and it means something. And a lot of people go through this psychedelic experiences not knowing what it means. So they just chase the next psychedelic experience thinking, oh, it's going to change my life. It's going to change my life. But what they don't know is they need to interpret what they went through and what their unconscious mind is telling them to make sense of it and integrate it into their life.
Yeah, it's tough because like dream analysis or dream interpretation is very similar in this aspect because your unconscious is talking to you, but because it's unconscious, you don't know what it means. We lack the language to interpret it. It's unconscious by definition because we're not aware of it, right? So conscious is just a fancy word for awareness. Unconscious is unaware. And if you're knocked unconscious, for example, in like a boxing match, you're not aware. You're asleep, right? You're out. So when we're talking in terms of our parts of our psyche, conscious is what we know, unconscious is what we don't know, and there's so much more that we don't know that tapping into that can be terrifying because it means we have to acknowledge that there's things within us that we may not want to embrace, and that could be for great or terrible. Greatness, well, everybody loves greatness, right? We all want to be great, except that's terrifying as well because it means now you have this awareness that you have more potential and maybe you need to achieve it. If it's not great, if it's terrible, if it's harmful, if it's evil, perhaps, we don't want to acknowledge that because it's like, well, I don't want to admit that I have the potential to, say, harm others. But you may need that in an emergency, in a defensive situation. If you have to rush your kid to the hospital, you got to break the laws, right? So we want to be able to access this stuff in a measured, controlled way of some sort that makes meaning. And I love that you mentioned the birth and death thing because that I'm going to go on one brief little soapbox here for a second. I think that in the last 120-ish years, we have outsourced birth and death to the point that we've lost touch with both. And we don't cherish birth, we don't cherish life anymore, and we don't appreciate death as a natural part of life such that we've become afraid of it. So we used to have births in the home, we used to have deaths in the home, and now we've just outsourced that to the hospitals and the hospice centers and the funeral parlors and all that stuff. So it's just one soapbox. I think that the ability to look deep within oneself and make contact with that very deep, very real part of ourselves that I think modern culture has invited us to ignore is critical to establishing meaning and deep, fulfilling relationships with one another, especially with our own selves, capital S.
Well, you bring in an incredibly important point, right? We since we have outsourced those human experiences, we miss the meaning of that, and of course the being scared of it and the unknown and the messiness of both experiences, but we miss the beauty of them as well. And this kind of connects right back to Janine where you started. You were you were taking something that you wanted to get off. It was limiting your experience. There wasn't the high and there wasn't the low, and there's both in birth, potentially, and there's both in death potentially, and just like this conversation, we don't know which one it will necessarily be, if it's going to trend more to something traumatic and painful. And I mean, not all births, of course, go the way that we think that they're going to go, and not all deaths are as beautiful as we would like them to be. It's not always a movie version of that. And gosh, I don't know, it's an interesting place. Maybe it's a spot, kind of me going silvery now. But it's interesting seeing so many folks. Um, we had my wife had the uh, I'd say courage and the ability, and it's not a given that you can deliver at home, but we had each of our kids at home or in a birthing center, and that was a tremendous experience for us. Terrifying for me, and also really, really powerful. It was terrifying. There's like I was well aware there was nothing I could do. If this Not much I could do, not much helpful that I could do if this goes poorly. And that was an amazing experience for us. And it's not something that everybody gets to experience, or depending on the health and that kind of stuff, that everybody really ought to check out. Which is kind of like this conversation. This is a really interesting opportunity for people to look into life, and it's similar with death. I mean, we have I won't share specifics, but we're going to a memorial this weekend. Dear close family friends of ours, and they were able to be there as she passed, together and singing together, and holding hands, and like, man, what a beautiful, beautiful experience. I'm familiar with other stories, very close to my heart, of where it wasn't as beautiful. But what was learned from those incredible experiences was the depth of our humanity, was how meaningful this life is. And so I want to connect that maybe right on over to uh, there aren't givens. There just aren't givens. But when we miss out on the highs and the lows, or we anesthetize those things, gosh, what a loss. Life is risk, right?
And freedom isn't safe. Mike.
Yeah. So Janine, when you first started microdosing, did you? I don't want to get too personal and make you air out stuff, but was that like your first foray into psychedelics, or had you taken them to trip out and have fun before? Like what? Because some people start with microdosing, and then other people are like, okay, I took mushrooms, I had this great experience. I think I want to try microdosing.
Yeah, so I actually first experienced mushroom in Amsterdam, because I was too scared. I was too scared to do it in the United States. I'm like, it's illegal. I am scared. And I was in Europe, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try some mushrooms, and it didn't really give me that experience that I was looking for. Maybe because I was in a different country and I wasn't very comfortable. It was mostly I got the giggles, which is, a given for a lot of psychedelic trips. But it wasn't the introspective experience that I was looking for. And then after that, I got back and I did it a couple more times, like one of the big trips, which is not the heroic dose, but just enough to get that full effect. And I did had some introspective moments, and it would kind of scare me, because sometimes I would take like a full mushroom and it would take me on a completely different journey, even though what I intended to do is just to microdose. Because the compounds of it, you don't really know if it's in the stem, it's on the cap, like it can be anywhere. And especially if you're eating, let's say, chocolate mushrooms, it's inconsistent, because it can be on this side of the chocolate or that side of the chocolate. So to answer your question, it wasn't my first. However, I knew what to expect, because I have done it maybe 10, 11, 12 times before that. I also had, during the pandemic, I had a lot of experience with cannabis. And I know a lot of people smoked in high school and all of that, but I didn't. I was the good kid. So I didn't really got into cannabis until I was 24, 25. And that too, when you were talking about experiencing psychedelics in the club setting, I feel like I can't do that anymore, because now every time I ingest psychedelics, I just get quiet and introspective. So I believe it's probably the set and the setting. Like if I wouldn't take it outside, just because I haven't really done that. Like I have taken MDMA in the party scene as well, and it was like, it was fun, but it wasn't introspective for me. And now every time I would take or smoke cannabis, I have the Volcano. So Stores and Bickle produces them, and it's the cleanest way to smoke cannabis. It's a vaporizer. And every time I would use that, I would just get in my head and not outside. Does that make sense? Kind of like, it's not a social drug for me. So
yeah, maybe question there.
It sounds like you, and this is what I always recommend to everybody, because like for me too as well, like there came a point in my life where I was like, I like to be able to control my own environment, right? If I don't feel the music or whatever it is, I can just shift and change that music, and I don't have 12 people angry at me or like, hey, why do you want to go somewhere else? Like I totally agree with you going in this. I also appreciate the Amsterdam thing, because that was the first. I have the best stories about Amsterdam. I remember seeing these these three Spanish girls staring at a swan. Anyone that's been to Amsterdam knows that there's all these swans inside the canals that you're walking around, and they were dying laughing at the swan. And all my friends wanted to just go smoke cannabis, and I hate that. Like I've never been a cannabis smoker. It's like a tranquilizer dart. It's very similar to when Will Ferrell shot himself in the neck, right? Like it puts me down immediately. But so I said to my buddy, I said, what are they on? And he goes, mushrooms. You could buy them here legally. And that's how I mentally got over it. I was like, okay, well, we're not breaking any laws. Let's go. Right. And I remember like getting into the shop, and the guy's like, hey, you want to buy some cannabis or whatever? I'm like, no, I'm going to do some mushrooms. And he's like, have you done this before? And I was just like, I think it's a good time to lie to him, because I don't want to hear like the whole like P.F. Chang sauce speech. You know, I was just like, yeah, we're fine. And he's like, yeah, we recommend you like stay in your hotel room or maybe go to a quiet park. And I remember thinking in my head, yeah, man, that's exactly what I want to do on mushrooms right now. Like go into my hotel room. But I get out to this bar and I'm with my buddy, and I was like, these things don't work. I remember I was like, these things don't work. He's like, give it time. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, that chick shirt is so cool. It's a hologram shirt, right? And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, well, when she moves, the girl on her shirt moves with it. It's a hologram shirt, right? And he was like, no, man, you're high. And I was just like, at that moment, it was crazy, because when you're looking at a bar, all the bottles have like really different colors. And one of the most amazing things about mushrooms to me is what it does to our eyes. Right? Like the way we see vibrant colors. I've taken pictures before of something that is so beautiful, and the next morning when I go to show somebody, I realized that they didn't see it the way I saw it. So they're like, yeah, that's cool. It's a blue car. You know what I'm like, no, but you don't understand how blue it was. But at that moment in the bar, when it finally like hit me, I remember feeling like it was raining sunshine, like it was warm. And I literally got on the phone and started calling random people in the United States to tell them how much I love them. You know what I mean? So like, it's funny when you go through that first high. It's like, it is amazing when you say like, oh my God. And going back to the original comment, Jake, or the original thing we were talking about, is that's the danger, right? Like I've never understood what makes someone an addict, and then someone who can kind of duck in and have a good time and not do it for 2 or 3 months and then duck back in, right? Like that's the danger of it. If someone literally is like, I want to do this every day, right? Which, like I said, I've never understood that part of addiction. I guess I've been fortunate, but yeah, it's really interesting. But I always ask people, because it's two different worlds, right? It's the massive trip. Right, Janine? Like it's the trip, and then there's the microdose, and people need to understand there's a huge difference in the two. So when people tell me they're microdosing and they're high, I'm like, no, you're not supposed to really feel that when you're microdosing. Like you're taking too much. You know, like I recommend people to microdose with capsules where they can measure it out. So
I want to address that at some point, but DB had something and Janine wants to respond. So.
Oh, well, yeah. So maybe a question, Janine, you were mentioning, that, well, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like your experience with psychedelics has fairly stabilized. Like you expect a certain way that you walk through it. Is that a normal expectation? Is like that just how it works for you? Or is it always variable? What's your sense of that?
Okay. So I believe that it could be different. It is, well, let me rephrase that. It is different for every person, and it is mostly based on the state that they're in. So if you're very down and you're just like, I hate life, F this, F that, you're gonna have a bad trip, because you're in that bad mental state. But if you're going into it thinking, yeah, I'm down right now, however, I do want to get over this rut. Like I'm ready to have all the insights that I can get from this psychedelic trip, and I am going to take that and run with it instead of, just let the psychedelics, because it could take you in a real dark spot. Like, I'm sure you've heard of a lot of people having bad psychedelic trips, and sometimes, you know, you're having an experience, and then you just see a random scary photo, and then all of a sudden you're having paranoia. So it can take you in a lot of different ways, and that is why it is important to be in a good setting. Like what Michael was saying, you know, like they told you to go to your hotel room, and I think they're just looking out for you, and because they want you to have that good experience your first time, to be in a calm, controlled environment. So it depends a lot on where you're at. So set, mindset, and setting where you're at physically. And my comment for Michael earlier is, the good thing about mushrooms is you can't get addicted to it because you build tolerance. So for microdosing, you can't even microdose like 3 days in a row because you have to take breaks. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
100%.
So-
People do it all the time. They tell me, I did mushrooms, and the second night, I'm like, yeah, the second night you're not going to have that same experience you had the first night. You know?
Yeah, it wouldn't work the same. It's just like, it doesn't work. So yeah.
Janine, seeing you just kind of touched on that. So I do substance use therapy, and one of the trends in our realm is harm reduction, not so much complete abstinence. And you kind of already touched a little bit on like the safety rules in a sense of doing these things. So again, we're not telling you to do these things. We're not telling you how to do these things. But in the event that someone is to do some of the things, like you touched on, you know, the settings and the safe place. But what are some of the other, like, you know, like kind of rules to follow if someone is actually doing these things or ever thinking about these things or anything?
Well, what, are you talking about a journey, or are you talking about microdosing, Eddie?
What do either one she wants to answer? I mean, I know there is a difference, like for a journey, I mean, that's like in a complete experience, and for microdosing, just little ones. But I mean, like however she wants to answer, I'm kind of leaving an open ended for a reason for her to try to answer the way she feels comfortable.
Got it. So the biggest thing for that is know exactly where your mushrooms are coming from, or whatever plant medicine you're taking, wherever they're coming from, because sometimes with dried mushrooms, you know, obviously you see that it is a mushroom. I'm having connection issues. I'm sorry. It's saying it's loading.
I can hear you. You're fine on this end.
Okay. So with mushrooms, dried mushrooms, you could see that it is an actual dried mushrooms. However, if it's in a different form, like capsule, so sometimes it could be laced with something if you don't know where it's coming from. I went to Berlin once, and someone was offering me this MDMA, and it was pink. And I'm just like, I don't know about that. Because first, I don't know you. Second, why is your MDMA pink? And I don't really want to take that. So knowing where to get it, getting it from a reputable place, like a dispensary, or, you know, someone that you know and trust and who has been doing that for a while, then get it from that person. But I think other things that I could say for a safe trip would be just have an open mind and surrender to it. Don't fight it. Because if you do fight it, that's when it might start to get bad. So you just need to, once you're in it, just surrender and let it take the wheel.
My understanding is it really is therapeutic, and it's the parallels to therapy as we understand it in talk therapy are very, very similar. If you fight your therapist, you're not going to have a great time. You know, like if you go in with a bad attitude, or like, I'm only here because my mom made me, like, it's not going to work. And similarly, if you're unlocking your inner unconscious, you want to be humble and deferential to what that's going to bring forward and bring out of you. And I only draw this on other people's testimonies, but also my reading of Jung, and honestly, like some of the other people, like, you know, Joseph Campbell and David Hawkins. And when they talk about the depth of the human soul, like you're talking about some deep stuff, man. And if we all have the same potential, one human to the next, that means that you and I and everybody else on this screen has the same potential as any other human that's ever walked the earth. So just wrap your head around that. Like if you're going to go diving in, yeah, you could find yourself touching the potential of Napoleon or the potential of Mother Teresa, right? Like there's opposite ends of this continuum. But somewhere in there is you, the you that God made you to be. And if we've been obstructed through culture, influence, voices of authority over time, that's somehow occluded who we truly are, my understanding is that, active psychiatric consultation with a depth psychologist can achieve similar results as the psilocybin or psychedelic drug experiences, only the drugs do it faster. And if you don't have at least a base knowledge of what you're getting into, it can be really terrifying. My question actually for Janine and for anybody else who wants to chime in on the chat too, because I know we've got a pretty active chat going on the live stream. How do we know that we're not just replacing, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Now, we're not replacing an avoidance strategy with another avoidance strategy. So like if we take, say, street drugs or alcohol or whatever to avoid our emotions, that's a pretty common thing for people to do. We're trying to get people off those substances to get in touch with themselves. Psychedelics will do that, but then it's like you take your one trip and it's a guided trip and you look inside yourself and this journey is really great and good. And you go, wow, there's more to me than I realize. Okay. That's the point, right? It's to unlock things and increase potential. But if we have this theory that the human psyche is limitless because it's of the divine and the divine is limitless, couldn't we be entertaining the idea that we're introducing another addiction of sorts in perpetual trips, because you'll never actually hit an arrival point saying, I'm okay with who I am, because you could get addicted to following even further into the psyche to say, I always want to learn more, right? Does that become a risk of dependence or addiction? And Janine blinked out right when I was asking that, which is annoying for everyone. But did everybody? I'm sure you guys heard my question,
right? I think it's a really important question to consider, and I think that's why I find myself maybe on the fence at best. But at the same time, recognizing that people have some, really powerful experiences. I mean, I shouldn't say powerful experiences because we can have powerful experiences with a lot of things, but to be more maybe specific, that seem to have very, very positive experiences in it. And gosh, I want to withhold my own ignorance and kind of predisposition in this, while at the same time owning, since we're talking about it real openly, while really owning my own hesitation in the field, but it gosh, but for the grace of God, go we all in this. So it's a fascinating set of questions. It looks like we're trying to get Janine back in, so just holding for a sec there. But others thoughts on as we kind of rock through this?
Yeah, well, I just want to draw a parallel real quick, DB, and then Mike, I want to hear from you. But we could create the same dependence as clinicians. People keep coming in because we have read more about this topic than they have or whatever, right? And we don't want to do that either. We want to say, you are free to go explore life on your own. You don't need to come into my office anymore. So I'm trying to link this together, Mike.
I was going to say, I've seen, it's funny, we talk about what is an addiction, what is a drug. I've seen someone use a human as a drug, right? Like this.
Yeah, or softball, or yeah.
Right. This bad boyfriend was a drug. She couldn't kick it. You know what I mean? Like I've seen people use exercise as a drug. Like they exercise way too much, and they let their life around their healthy lifestyle get in the way of other things. I've seen it affect their relationship with their kids. I say so. Like it's a very tough call, DB, and that's that I've always wanted to. Like I've always thought about that. Like I said earlier, like what is it that makes someone addicted to something, whether it's a person, a drug, or whatever, and then how is I feel like I'm just gonna say it. I feel like for me, I was able to navigate that world, and I feel like I did a really good job of picking my shots, and it helped me personally, right? Like it's never controlled my life. It's never affected me showing up to a meeting. It's never, you know what I mean? Like it's never affected my relationship with my kids or anything like that. So the grappling you're doing that I'm actually watching you grapple with, like right now, I think that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly normal because I mean, you're a positive person and you're always the one who's just like, we could talk through this or, get your mind right, right? But the power of psychedelics and DB, it's because I walked in this world, right? Like if I hadn't just seen it from my own eyes, not for only just myself, but, literally having people in my life that when they wanted to go on a journey and watching them do the same thing I did, like it's that 2-week window where they're just completely a different person and happy. I never just recommended saying that. I mean, I'm never going to tell a stranger at a bar, like, oh, yo, you know what you need to do? You need to take some mushrooms. Like it's everybody that has always come into my life has always been like, I'm very curious about this. And now I'm ready. And like I said, when you see the positive effects, when you see somebody, I'll give you guys another quick story. Like I was watching a guy on DMT. I have a superpower. The superpower is DMT doesn't work on me. I've been with the biggest like gurus and shamans and people that are like, you've never had real DMT. And I was just like, yeah, well, I feel like I have. And it just does not, I do not go on those journeys. I was in Costa Rica. It didn't work. Everybody was crowded around me like the Wizard of Oz at the end of the movie. And they were like, it didn't work. And I was like, nothing. Right. But I watched DMT. I watched a gentleman like go on the DMT trip and immediately like break out into tears. And I was kind of like, is he okay? And everyone was like, no, just chill, watch. And like, he called his wife and I was like, that's not a good idea. like not now. Right. Cause I'm thinking like she's gonna, but the things that he said to his wife at that moment were beautiful. And after I was like, I managed to get some alone time with him. We were sitting in this house and I was like, hey, yeah, I was telling him how I don't get affected by DMT. So I was like really curious about it. But he started to tell me what was happening in his life. And he was like, she actually told me to go here and do this. She's never done it. But she was just like, I want you to go there and do this. And I saw him a year later and there was no like, yeah, it only worked for whatever. Like that moment started to repair whatever was wrong in his life. And like I said, I don't want to be the guy who's just like, this is the end all be all answer. Like what Jake was saying, like, we're not recommending that, but if you're desperate, right? If you've tried all these other things, if you tried SSRIs and you don't like the way you feel, like I believe microdosing can be a great alternative to it. And we can't just say it doesn't exist or that's all in your mind or that's the druggy thing. So, but welcome back, Janine.
All right, I lost you guys there for a second.
Did you catch my question about, is it possible that we're introducing an addictive pattern to people who can't get enough of diving deep into their own psyches because it truly will never end? If my theory is correct that the human psyche is divine and if we're all creatures of God, you can never have an arrival point because you would be tantamount to God. Therefore, the journey never ends. You never arrive and say, I am fully individuated or whatever, right? I'm fully self-aware. So therefore, could we possibly be introducing a never-ending pattern of just mental exploration through substances? And is that a good thing? I mean, that's a different question. Like maybe the answer is yes, we could be, but so is everybody else who's ever walked the earth. They're always trying to figure out who they are, right? But then is it a good thing that we're doing it through psychiatric substances?
Right. So I think I could see how that could be bad. Like I said, some people are constantly chasing for that next high. That's like somewhere to put it. But I think that as long as you're aware of why you're doing it and you know that, there's really not going to be that full awareness. Like you're not really going to reach that. You're always going to know everything. It's okay. And I guess I could see how it could be a problem that people could, abuse the substances and kind of just like, no, I'm gonna take the psychedelic and it's gonna tell me what I need to do, and kind of live their life that way. And it could be a cycle. And I think it's different for everyone, and it could be addicting. But with mushrooms, like I said earlier, it is something that you can't really do. You can't do it. You can do it every week, once a week, maybe. You can't do it every day. It's you build tolerance after 2 or 3 times. So, I mean, with ayahuasca, they advise us not to do ayahuasca at least a year after we did it. And I'm sure, like in shamanic traditions, a lot of people in different countries who are still practicing that, they would probably take it every day. And it is not because they're addicted to it. It is because they're trying to see where it would take them. They need to know what's going to happen if they take it every single day. Because I have heard of them do that in Peru, where shamans in training would take ayahuasca every single day and see, like how it awakens them.
Yeah, I was not asking whether about a chemical dependency issue, more so I become addicted to the journey, right? So, and we battle that in our own profession, where people just want to keep coming back to counseling because it's enjoyable and they learn stuff. It's like, yeah, but that's not indicated for why you should be here. We should be discharging you at some point. For better or for worse, we're still under the medical model. The medical model says you have a problem, we have a goal. And once you hit the goal, the problem goes away and you leave my office. I'm not going to keep you coming back just because it's fun. That would be highly inappropriate for a whole bunch of reasons that are all undergirded by ethics, not the least of which is finances. But even if you're wealthy, we don't want to create a dependent relationship. And I don't want to, I'm asking, do people become addicted to the journey of always wanting to find more about themselves, which I guess is okay. I mean, if you're eagerly pursuing God within self, that's probably a wise thing. And now that I'm saying this, maybe there is no inherent risk there, because if God is good and God created us, the closer we get, the less likely we are to become abusive of whatever it is that we're doing, and we'll actually become more in harmony. So maybe there's an inherent non-risk, because God's not harmful. So I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here at this point.
Yeah,
Right.
it's one of those situations, and I totally agree with you. It's impossible to do mushrooms every day. You're just never going to get that feeling. It's not like meth or something like that. That's like you're going to get that instant high no matter what. But I do hear what you're saying, Jake, because this could be very fun, right? And you could kind of get addicted to the fun aspect. And if that's what's jamming you up because you're trying to go on journeys where it's affecting you showing up to work, and maybe you're not just doing a psychedelic journey, maybe you're drinking while you're doing this stuff. That's another thing I think, Janine, like we can both attest to what Eddie asked, is like preparation for when you want to do this stuff. It's like, hey, don't get drunk. You know what I mean? Like, don't sit there and like booze all night while you're taking mushrooms if you're really trying to understand yourself, because that's not going to help. Obviously, I tell people all the time, try not to eat within 4 hours, because being full can definitely affect that. You'll be like, yeah, these things don't work. There's all these little tricks, Eddie, that you can prepare for this night if you're going to go the journey route, right? Like if you're going to go the microdosing route, that's a totally different story. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Jake. I think you can get addicted to good times, right? And this could be fun, and you could be like, this is the world I want to live in, and I'm still not addressing the issue that I have.
think it's an interesting issue because we're talking about chasing something or the addiction aspect. I mean, gosh, we could be talking Xanax, we could be talking SSRIs, we could be talking all kinds of things. And for me, I think that's probably gosh, how to phrase it? Interesting is a poor word. That's the big question is these are, for example, if we're talking mushrooms and microdosing, we're looking at organic, naturally occurring substances. Similar, if we're talking about cannabis, we're talking about an organic, naturally occurring substance. Now, yeah, we can chemically turn those things up. Absolutely. Maybe that's a whole different conversation. What happens when we start putting them in the lab? I would say it's absolutely a totally different conversation because who's in the lab? Why are they doing that? But if we just look at the substances themselves, that's a very interesting conversation of how did this all of a sudden become scheduled, or how did this become prohibited, and to what end? And that for me provides probably the strongest amount of positive interest in what this could be. Because I have really low interest in the pharma side of all of this. Very low trust on the pharma side, which maybe pharmacide is probably inaccurate, putting those two together, fratricide and pharmacide. So I guess that's the part for me that really has me leaning into, there's a lot that I don't know about this. There's a lot that I know I've been programmed to think about this. And I really want to withhold some kind of spiritual judgment on this, because I could cite a number of verses to effect that would say that I probably should stop it in terms of the judgment aspect here, and then a number of things that I'm on the fence and concerned about. Like we talked about the kind of surrender to the thing. And, in full transparency, I've typed in jest in the chat here, like never surrender. But at the same time, I'm thinking, yeah, kind of never surrender. I might stick with that. That I would only kneel to God, only surrender to that faith. And at the same time, I think I get what the purpose though is to go with the process, is to be committed to the thing that you're going into. And to that end, I would say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
For people who want to, I'll speak to DB obviously because he just brought it up, but if anybody's listening who wants to learn more about this and you're just totally green to it, Michael Pollan has a book called How to Change Your Mind. It's very good. And he was also interviewed on Tim Ferriss's podcast. He has a very good interview on there some years ago. There's a number of people who have written about this stuff in a competent layperson way. Ghost and I were texting on the side. He actually dropped in some stuff I want to read for the listening audience who's not on the stream. He says, I don't think we will ever be completely self-aware. Thank you for agreeing with me, by the way. That said, most of us never really see parts of our true self. Once you're able to drop your facade and open up, your life can get better. And then he mentioned this guy who's well-known, Marcus Capone. He does ayahuasca, apparently, and he's on the Sean Ryan show. So if you look up the Sean Ryan show, it's a podcast, and Marcus Capone is on there. You can hear that discussion, which I'm sure is quite good also. But to the Christianity point, I've had friends in my very close inner circles who have experienced this journey stuff with MDMA specifically very recently, and they were just as hesitant for all the same reasons I'm sure you and I are. And what they experienced is an unlocking of the trauma histories that they knew they were carrying in a way that therapy never could, that pharmaceutical drugs never could. And they are now free. They are peaceful people. Marriages have improved. Parenting has improved. They don't drink anymore. I mean, it's like, and drinking wasn't really even a problem. It was just like, I don't need it anymore. I am more whole as a human being. It almost terrifies me as a home brewer to want to try this stuff because I like my home brew so much. I don't want to turn that corner and let it go. But the testimony of these people who have done this stuff, and it's in the dozens now of people I've spoken with. I don't want to say it's a miracle cure and it's 100% of the time, but my anecdotal experience with talking to people, it's 100% of the time. No one has had a bad experience. No one has regretted it. And that to me is very, very powerful. And these are people who are very close to me and I've trusted for a really long time. So I think if I were struggling with something mighty, I would want to take this path. If I'm not, I don't know that I would, because I don't want to hijack my own natural journey walking the earth either, right? So I don't necessarily want to accelerate my own understanding of self artificially just because I can. I think there's something problematic about that. But for people who are not free and are definitely locked in their psychiatric disturbances, I think we should absolutely continue researching, and personal testimonies aren't necessarily throwaways either. But it's coming. It's been coming for about 8 years now, and finally it's hitting the radar of .gov to the point that they're considering scheduling it down. I just hope pharma doesn't take it over and ruin it.
Well, apparently it's the Homebrewing Association we should be worried about.
That's right.
Damn homebrewers.
Attest to that, Jake, because after my ayahuasca ceremony, I did not want to drink. I don't think I touched alcohol for like 4 months after that. Not even cannabis. I was kind of just riding that high for a bit. And yeah, I didn't feel the need to drink or to smoke weed. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Janine. Anecdotal stories. We could probably have done 3 hours between me and you, and things Jake's seen, right? But what's your experience on it? I know I've never seen anyone spiral or say, I wish I didn't do that, after they came to me to pick my brain about taking a psychedelic journey, right? It's either they said, okay, I did it and it didn't give me what I thought it was going to give me and I'm not going to do it anymore. Or they were like, this was amazing. It blew my mind and it opened up a lot of things. And they got clarity. The clarity seems to be the word that most of my people that I've had these discussions with have come to me and said, this is what it brings to me. Do you have any really cool anecdotal stories just from, you doing this research and you being part of this community and, being in it? Do you have anything that you'd like to share that it doesn't have to be about you, just like what you've seen it do for somebody?
There you go. So are you talking about stories from when I was on the experience, or when
I'm just talking about maybe someone that you've met that went through this journey? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be when you were on it. I'm saying just like what you've seen. You know what I mean?
That changed them in a sense,
yeah,
or
for a positive.
So I've seen people got over their, I wasn't an alcoholic per se, but I was drinking like maybe every week, on the weekends, 1-2 drinks a week. And after that, I saw some changes in patterns of, I didn't crave alcohol at all. And I didn't crave weed. And at that point, I believe I was smoking weed maybe 3-4 times a week because I have anxiety. And we talked about that earlier, where people who suffer from anxiety, smoke weed to cope with it. And I didn't feel the need to have cannabis or drink alcohol. From other people that I've noticed, they're just lighter. I didn't tell a lot of people that I was going to do ayahuasca when I did it. And when I came back, my neighbors would just see me and they would be like, something's different. You look a lot lighter, like your face lights up and you just have this very inviting, energy around you. And to me, I'm like, that's weird. I didn't tell her I was gonna go on this ceremony in Mexico, and then I would tell them, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I went on a retreat, and maybe that's why I look different, because I left all my trauma in Mexico. That's like the joke that I tell people. It's like I left it all over there. It's all good. So I guess it wasn't really a story, but more like an observation on the changes that happens when you know, when you go through this experience and you have that post psychedelic, they call it post psychedelic glow, where they, like, people who don't even know that you did something notice it, and just the way you look, the way you present yourself, and the way you show up for the world.
I caught one of my friends that way. I was like, I don't know what you've been doing or working on, but this is amazing. And then it came out that it's like, oh, by the way, I did this thing. And it took an incredible amount of trust because this was a Christian friend who, you know, we'd been in the Christian circles for a long time. And I appreciated that trust that, you know, we weren't going to judge this individual. And in fact, openly supported it. So that same testimony was like, what happened? that happened. Years and years and years and years of trauma. Years and years of trauma. Just disappeared. Now that didn't end, right? That wasn't the end of it. There's still work to be done. There's still going to therapy. But it was like, I don't know, catalyst might be the right word. But it was a launch boost of, you know, pick your metaphor, that after years and years of grinding and not really getting anywhere, but incrementally, this just opened up access, I guess you could say. And it's been months now and it's only gotten better. So, well, I think that's a good place to stop. Janine, usually we end with takeaways, something that jumps out, you know, something you're going to use later, perhaps something we didn't know before. So Eddie's got to get back to work, so we should probably let him go first. What's one thing you're taking away from this, Eddie?
Well, first off, Janine, thank you for coming on this. I mean, this topic is something I've been interested in a while, but I mean, with any of the stuff with it, I mean, like Dr. Palmer said, I mean, it's scary to think about, especially. And I'll be open, I've never done that stuff. I've tried no weed, I've tried obviously alcohol, but I've never done any of the psychedelics. And it is interesting to think about and how, like, it can be used in therapy. And then of course, I know I've heard all these testimonies and stuff. I guess the takeaway for this one for myself is, again, just to be more open and just not some I guess more open to like how the world of therapy is changing, just and then just seek experts to see how to gather information.
DB?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a really, really active live chat. So that's probably a take home for me, is that this is a conversation that has really connected people and has really brought people, you know, from kind of watching and paying attention to what we're doing to actually being really, really engaged in the chat itself. And there's something to that I think is really important and powerful. So I want to recognize that, you know, I've got all kinds of limitations in my own perspective and all kinds of limitations in the things that I've seen and my own preferences and kind of preferences. I think I said preferences twice there. So doubly so. That just speaks to the point. And toward that end, I want to recognize those things and take a step back and pause whenever I go to a need, kind of an immediate thought about things. It doesn't mean that I won't still go in that direction, that I'm inherently wrong in that, but I want to always notice that hesitation and then take a look inside and see something else. I was listening to the Jocko podcast the other day, and he was talking about whenever he's in a disagreement with somebody, his go-to spot these days. So Jocko Willink, if you've ever heard of him, he's got a small podcast, a little bit of following. His first inclination, though, is to try to figure out why the other person is right. So what is their perspective and why are they right, so they can move towards agreement and success in something. And so that was a really good, that's not been my perspective, if I'm honest. So I want to move to that kind of position where if there's trust between me and another person, but there's disagreement, we're missing something somewhere, because we have the same mission, same values, or at least, you know, a shared understanding of those things. So there must be something else. It's probably not that the person is trying to dupe me. So it's the same in this. If I'm having confusion about this, I want to take a pause and try to get a sense of things.
I saw that post just yesterday, I think, that somebody had clipped it, and it reminded me of how I advise people to know how to explore their blind spots is when you feel that urge to reflexively disagree. That's an area to pause and examine and go, why am I feeling this, right? Why am I defensive? My takeaway is similar to DB's, that, you know, Ghost gave us kudos for having this conversation at all on a podcast called Guns and Mental Health. And G-Web's just chimed in. He says, due to legal status, people in the U.S. typically need to take a journey to get these experiences. Could part of the benefits be the plan, focus, and steps taken on that adventure? And I think that's a very salient point that we need to, you know, if we're going to encourage people to get healing in this way, just be mindful of the laws, right? So you don't end up short-circuiting yourself. So my takeaway is hope and inspiration that continued discussions about previously taboo topics are not only not off limits, but they're welcomed by a great deal of people. And if we can continue having those for folks in a respectful, thoughtful manner, I think we're gonna help a lot of folks. So my takeaway is hope. And Janine just got dumped again. Apparently the San Francisco internet is not all it's cracked up to be, but we'll go to Mike for a takeaway, I guess. And hopefully Janine can come back.
Yeah, my takeaway from this is first off, I'm glad we're having the conversation. I think it's really interesting. I really think that vets are the reason why we're, you know, combat vets or military vets are the reason why we're having this conversation, because I think people like Janine and Ghost, they're pushing this forward. And I don't know if it would have got its platform, especially with non-psychedelic people, if we hold our vets near and dear to our heart, right? Like all of us do for the most part. And if they weren't showing the progress with this type of treatment, I'm not sure it would have this national platform and be okay. Right. So I love the fact that it is getting pushed to the forefront and people are starting to like be curious about this stuff. Once again, I want to stress this is not for everybody. As probably the most pro psychedelic guy on this panel, maybe besides Janine, but I'm here on the reg, right? So I would say that this is something that has to be, you have to go into it with thought, purpose, like trying to understand what you want to do. And one of the things that I can't stress enough that Janine said is, if you are in a really bad way, if your heart is broken because your significant other has left you, this is not going to solve your problem, right? This is not the time to do it. Your dog died. It's not the time to do it. This is not a magic cure. This is about growth. So please keep that in mind for anybody that's listening that might try it or be curious about it. And then also too, like, feel free to contact us. Like we respond to everything. There's somebody in this organization that has experiences in everything, right? Like I go to DB for things. I'll go to Jake for something. Eddie will go to DB. Like everybody has something to offer. So if you are curious about this, please feel free to reach out. I think it's important that you get the proper guidance if you're trying to go this route. But anyways, Janine is back. Welcome back, Janine. Again, I want to thank you for coming on. I've wanted to have this conversation with these guys for a long time. And like DB said, the fact that the chat is getting so much attention, I didn't know how this type of conversation would work out for us. And it seemed like it's very positive, and it seems like the listening audience feels like it's positive. So thank you for coming on.
That's your cue to do your takeaway, Janine. Oh, and apparently we have no audio. Lovely. I blame Gavin Newsom. Well, Kevin can do a takeaway while Janine's figuring things out.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, there. Now
Okay.
You're back there.
All right, I keep having connection issues. I'm not sure why, but yeah, it's great having this conversation with you guys, and I'm honestly really happy that a lot more people are becoming more open to, psychedelic studies and trying psychedelics, because a lot of people are scared to lose control, and they they always want to be in control. And when you're under the influence of psychedelics, you're not in control. You're kind of letting your unconscious psyche like take the wheel for you. And it's quite a journey, and I know it's still going to be quite a journey with legalization and everything happening here in the state of California and in the United States. So yeah, I'm very grateful that I got into this study, and at the same time I'm not surprised, but I guess I don't know what the word is, but I am glad that a lot of military members, veterans, are willing to, heal using psychedelics. Really, because a lot of people would brush it off as like, that's woo-woo, too spiritual for me. I don't want to try it, but it has proven to be effective to a lot of people. So I would like to end my takeaway with a quote from Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, and it is, "We are not human beings having spiritual experiences. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." So thank you.
I just saw that too. That's a good one also. And I don't want to leave Kevin out. Kevin's been here patiently trying to connect and reconnect everybody along the way. What's your takeaway, Kev?
I think it was just great to hear everybody's kind of perspective. And on this conversation, we had lots of different people viewing it from all different points of where they look at it, and everybody was open to it and interested and curious. So I thought it was a great conversation coming from a lot of diverse perspectives that probably the listening audience had. So a little bit of everybody's mindset got addressed and a place for.
Janine, if people want to reach you, how can they do so? Do you on the socials? Or do you not do that? She's giving us a thumbs up. She's working on something.
So I am on social media. I only have an Instagram. It's Janine Fleuries, but just type in Janine De Mesa and you'll find me.
Right on. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. I really like that. Well, on behalf of our sponsors that continue to make this possible, the names of which you've heard throughout, if you're listening on the podcast version, but if you're online, they are Arms Corps, Chattanooga Shooting Sports, NASGW, USCCA, and Ruger. We really appreciate continued support. And if you're out there and you know somebody who would like to support us, we do have a new feature at Walk the Talk America, and it is concealed carry instructor download videos for those of you who live in states that require mental health training for an hour or more in your instruction. We have an hour's worth of videos, and we're actually going to add a few more. We seek sponsors for those videos too. So if you have a product you want to put in front of CCW students, let us know. Reach out to us, and we can slap your name on one of those video chapters. But on behalf of our whole family here, thanks for paying attention. Please show this around so that people can get edumacated and we can make Earth better. Thanks, everybody. We wish you all great mental wellness. Bye-bye.